Welcome to the International Schools Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Taylor, and on the podcast we discuss all aspects of technology and life in international schools, with new episodes live every 2 weeks. We focus on people currently working in international schools, and we talk about life in their current country, and then we dive into some specific topics. The podcast is sponsored by Apps Events. We're a Google for Education partner and made up of former educators, all experts in helping schools integrate Google into their schools and classrooms. All training is customized for every school to make sure it has lasting impact. We're also experts on online virtual Google training, and we can deliver all our certification bootcamps and training completely online to schools. We have teams in Europe and the Middle East, Asia and the US, and we can help you wherever you are. Check it out over at appsevents.com. We're also delighted to say we're now an ISTE partner, and we're delivering the ISTE Certified Educator worldwide with our subsidiary AE Learning. ISTE certification is a pedagogy-focused, vendor-neutral, professional certification aimed at educators wishing to transform their EdTech practice. We run 2-day certification bootcamps, which are amazing fun, great networking, and will give you a huge boost both to your career and for your school. Get all the info at aelearninglab.com. Finally, the podcast is brought to you by Acer for Education. People ask us what Chromebooks and Windows laptops we recommend for schools, and after literally trying them all, we always recommend Acer. If you'd like to get more information, please just leave your email at gg.gg/Acer Education, and we'll get straight back to you. We go to Acer HQ in Taiwan every year to be part of product discussions, and they are genuinely the best thought out, cost-effective, and durable devices out there. And now, on to the interview. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, it's great to be talking to someone called Ryan Rassar. Now, Ryan is in the US, and we got in touch because we're both members of an entrepreneurial group called the Dynamite Circle, and there was a thread in there talking about homeschooling and stuff, which is kind of an interesting topic. I've got young children now, so I already know it's not for me, but I am interested in it. And Ryan was contributing, and Ryan actually works for an online school in the US, a charter school, I believe, and runs a company called STEMquest. It's educational training. So Ryan, thanks very much for being on the podcast. It's super interesting. You're doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a busy time, an interesting time for sure. And online education's kind of been thrown into the limelight a little bit as of recent. So I've been in it for a few years now, so I have a little bit maybe more background than some, whereas a lot of educators are just kind of got thrown into all this really recently.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, with my business, we've been doing Google training with schools for since 2006, really. Really, it's part of Google for Education, and so I've always been working with schools, running. Schools that were teaching face to face, but they were using Google Classroom, or they were using different, learning management systems. They were doing a lot of the stuff online, and people the teachers who were embracing that before are adapting really well to the current situation. Yep,
makes sense.
Yeah, but I'm keen about your background. So before we get, because the great thing about the podcast is we didn't really talk before. So I want to learn about you. Like, if we could start from the beginning. I mean, what did you? I saw you went to like a community college, and then you went to university in Las Vegas. Like, what was your background, and how did you get into teaching?
Yeah, so I grew up in Washington State in the United States, and I was going to college. From the time I was younger, I always thought I wanted to be an architect when I grew up. So that was always. I never had to really worry about too much of what I wanted to be when I grew up, when they give you all those little surveys and stuff in school, like, take this survey and it'll guide you towards what you want to be when you grow up. Yeah. And so I'd have to take the little survey, but I always like architecture and engineering was always kind of towards the top of the list. So yeah, I got my original associate's degree at community college because I was paying my own way through school.
Yeah, and I had, but I mean, that's actually, a lot of American fans have said, like, that's actually the cheap way to do it, and the clever way to do it is you do a 2-year associate's degree at a community college, and then a lot of colleges you can just transfer into third year, and you save a whole lot of money. But people don't want to do it because people have like a status thing. They don't want to be at a community college. But it seems to me that's a sensible way to do things in the US.
Yeah, no, I mean, it worked out well for me, but I mean, I was working my way through school. I worked at a restaurant, and then I would have my college classes. And then I ended up transferring to school in Nevada because it was less expensive than paying in-state tuition at the University of Washington. And
So
they
you
had
went to the University of Washington in Seattle, did you? Or that was the plan originally?
that was the plan originally. I got accepted into the degree program I wanted. It was landscape architecture, actually was the degree I ended up. It was the field of architecture I wanted to go into, is more site planning, and like kind of the pre-planning stages of putting together like developments and buildings and things, as opposed to putting together like structural drawings of like the actual building once you put it up. But so yeah, I went to university in Nevada and then started working in the profession. I was already working in offices through my last couple of years of school. And then as soon as I graduated, I started my first company, which was a landscape design company. Worked with contractors doing installations. So basically on a lot of like private residential and some smaller commercial landscapes.
Just jump in, like, how did you, like,
Yeah.
22, 23, whatever, how did you start a company in that area and get clients? Because you always imagine people running that kind of business are probably older,
Yeah.
in their 30s or 40s and stuff. How did you do that?
So I've been working in a couple different offices, and there's this one in particular where there was a private designer that was doing like kind of freelance work. So he would come in and he would do designs and find clients, and he'd been doing it for quite a while. And then we were a design build construction company. So they were primarily a construction company, but then we would do our own in-house designs. I would do design work, but then they had crews of people that would go out and do the installs. Well, he would go out and do his own designs and then bring them into the office, get them bid out, and then they would do the installation. So I kind of hooked up with him, and he said, hey, instead of working here in this office, why don't you come work with me and we can, do our own thing. So I had actually, went and filed for a business license and started my sole proprietorship, and I partnered up, not in partner terms with him, but kind of, handshake agreement. And so we just kind of went to work. And then the crunch of, this is how it kind of wraps around back to education, I guess. And then 2007 hit, 2007, 2008, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall. Yeah, the office that I was working with at the time, I'd actually had to go back to work in an office because to get my architectural license and my stamp, I had to work under a licensed architect for a couple years. Yeah. And so I didn't quite have that couple years under my belt. So I actually had to go back to, pardon me, work in an office. And that was about 2007. And that year, I think we signed up 100 and some projects that year. And then the recession hit. And the next year, I think they signed up 11. Everybody got let go. They got stripped way down. I tried to outrun the storm and I moved to Texas, Austin area, and worked for an architect there for about a year. Saw the impending wave was coming because there was no money, like they weren't lending. And we were designing multi-use residential, mixed-use residential, and living apartments. They'd have like, a parking garage wrapped with retail around the bottom, with apartments above it, with community center and swimming pool and stuff like that. But there was no money, there was no lending. And so all those projects just got cut, and everybody there at that office got let go. And so my joke is I got into education for the money because my wife was a teacher. I already knew what I was getting into, and at least we would be on the same schedule and I would have a steady paycheck as opposed to no paycheck. So that was how I got into classroom teaching. So I went back to school.
And like teaching, I mean, I work with a lot with international schools, and there's actually, if you look on a global level, there's a lot of really well-paid jobs in education. Like it's not, everyone thinks it's a badly paid field, and there is a lot of low salaries, but if you look for the right opportunities, there are pretty well-paid things in education.
Yeah. No, I'm super happy. I mean, it was like just one of those random curveballs that life throws at you. And I thought, for the longest time, I knew exactly what I wanted to be. And then I got into that profession. And after a few years of it, I was kind of like, you know what? This isn't really that cool.
I don't know what it's like in the US, but like in the UK where I'm from, like my brother was an architect, actually my dad was as well, and it's actually not that well paid in the UK. It takes a long time, because in the UK, like in England, a degree is normally 3 years. I mean, an architecture degree is 4 to 5 years, and then you have to do a postgraduate, and then there's a qualifying period. It's like longer than being a doctor to become an architect,
Yeah.
And when you get through to the end of it, there's a lot of people, and it's not that well paid until you become a partner. So, I mean, my brother, he went into property development, and now he's making a lot of money. But that's, it's obviously a bit high risk, but if you pull it off, you make a lot of money. And the architects I know who've really made money have all become property developers, basically.
Yeah, and that's actually, so I kind of thought I wanted to maybe go down that route, actually, when I got into it a little bit. And then like I
And
said,
is that true, like
I
in
didn't
the
have
US?
any
Is
money
it
and the
really?
recession hit.
Yeah,
So,
is it not that well paid, or is it well paid in the US architecture?
I mean, architect, it's all right. I mean, I think it pays probably better than most teachers. Like I
Yeah,
think you'd probably be a little bit, but it's kind of grinding work. Like
yeah,
you have to like lay out, specifications, and then you're doing like detail drawings, and um, it's like a lot of like CAD work
yeah, yeah.
in an office, on the computer and all that. So it's not as the fun creative part is like unfortunately a pretty narrow piece of the pie, and
Sure.
kind of the more tedious like day-to-day grind of it wasn't quite as that's not quite as fun. So I guess that's maybe why I kind of tried to look for something else, and education is definitely not the same every day.
Yeah.
But
Well, did you do a teaching license, or did you do a non-teaching role?
so I did. Yeah, I went back to school. They had a program. I was in Texas at the time, so you did have to go back, and I forget exactly how long the program was, but it was basically like a to get your teaching credential, you had to have a certain number of credits within the area. So I went to get a science credential, and then I added my special education endorsement on top of that. So I was, going to school at night. I was actually got hired. I started as a teacher's assistant in an early childhood program. So I was working in the school system during the day, in a classroom as a teaching assistant, and then I would have my classes at night to go back and get my teaching credential. And then they start you on like a provisionary license, and then after I think 3 years or something like that, you prove your professional development credits, your continuing ed credits, and then they bump you up to like a standard license.
Got it. Cool. And so how long did you do that? How long did you work as a teacher?
So I was a classroom teacher since 2000, and I started as an ed assistant in 2009. And then I got my first full-time teaching position. I was teaching computer technologies classes and coaching in a middle school, and that started in 2010. So that was just right about 10, 11 years now.
Cool, cool. And
Yeah.
so how did that so what was your path, and how did you, because obviously your role now is, before we get into the entrepreneurial stuff, like how did you get into becoming like an IT manager, like for the school, and how did you get into
Sure.
online teaching? Did you move to online teaching first, or what was the progression?
Good. So I was actually started as a brick and mortar, like traditional middle school teacher in 2010. I had a science endorsement, but I also had an endorsement to teach all subjects, grades 4 through 8. And I actually, my first position, when I first got hired, was actually to teach computer technologies. The middle school is looking for basically a computer tech teacher. So that's what I got hired for first. And then they said, well, if you really want to teach science, do this computer tech class for a year, and then maybe next year we'll see what's going on with our science department, because people tend to move around, go to a different school and whatnot. So I taught computer technologies, then I moved into teaching 8th grade science, and I did that. I was in Texas for 6 years.
Yep.
And then most of my family was towards the West Coast. So we started looking around at the map and decided where we wanted to move to. And I've moved to Las Vegas 3 times now, so I guess I'm going to stick around. But So we ended up picking Las Vegas back off the map. And when we came back to Las Vegas, I actually started working at a brick and mortar, but it was a charter school. And then I kind of, I was teaching engineering and robotics classes and science, and a job posting had popped up for an online school was looking for a STEM coordinator, science, technology, engineering, math department coordinator. So I applied, got that position, and that was with a virtual school. So that's when I kind of made the transition from traditional school to virtual school, and that was in 2014, I believe, somewhere right around there, for 15 maybe.
Before we get into that, I'm curious, a lot of non-US people, what is the difference would you describe between a charter school and a public school?
Gotcha. So the difference with the charter schools is that they have an agreement, a charter, through typically like some sort of a government agency. Like the way, a lot of times it's like through the state, and the way that the charter schools just get to operate a little bit differently than the way a traditional school does. So in the United States, the funding typically comes, kind of from the state down. You have your individual school districts that might be like in a city or a county. Even within a city, sometimes they have like, small little districts. Other places, the districts are a lot bigger. But what the charter school is, basically they get to kind of write their own vision statement and mission. So if you're a charter school, maybe you're focused on liberal arts, or maybe you're focused more on STEM engineering fields. Maybe you're
Right.
more focused on so you can kind of pick like the path that you want that school to go on. So it's
Yeah.
not it can be a little bit more focused. Now they do still have to abide by a lot of the same, or mostly the same, requirements in terms of fulfilling, state testing and making sure that your students are passing and meeting accountability standards and that sort of thing. Because they are a public charter school is still funded by, taxpayer funds.
Yeah.
In that regard, it's still a public school. But because it's with the way the charter is written, a lot of them have, caps on enrollment where they can only have X amount of students. A lot of them don't provide transportation. So if it is a brick and mortar charter school, you still have, you as the parent would have to get your child to the physical building, pick them up,
Right.
drop them off, that sort of thing.
Got
So
it.
that's kind of some of the surface level differences between a charter school and a public school.
Got it. Got it. Now, what's it like? I'm really curious about online schools because I've been learning more about this whole topic, because I've worked with a few people who work for online school. I mean, you have online school districts as well as online schools. Like what's it like in terms of when you take a job there? I mean, is everyone, I presume everyone's remote. Do you ever get together? Like, how does it actually work in terms of doing a job there?
Yeah, so generally people are remote. Generally, a lot of the online schools still do maintain some sort of a central office where a lot of like administrative things go on and things like that. Sometimes they actually do have like a physical building where students can come and have like teacher hours where they'll actually show up face to face and do like tutoring and that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But generally, yeah, people are the teachers and people who work generally remotely, and then it uses like video conferencing. So like everybody kind of got thrown into this whole, Google Meet and Zoom and, every other video conferencing tool that everybody's just all of a sudden in the last few months with the COVID-19 have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Online schools have been doing that for the last, many years.
And what were you using? Were you using Zoom or Google Meet, or what was your tools you were using for online teaching?
Currently, yeah, Zoom. Before that,
Yeah.
there's a company Blackboard Connect, Blackboard
Yeah.
Collaborate, those ones. But yeah, this functionality with Zoom works pretty well with, it has a pretty good tool where you can actually have when the kids are all on webcams, like you can't see exactly what's going on with their screen, but you can see their faces. It has the chat tool. You can send them files through there. So it works pretty well. So the different online schools do it a little differently, depending on the schedule. Some of them meet classes, every day. Some, sometimes maybe you have math every day, but you only have, like your science course might only be 2 days a week, or, the different schools have their different schedules. But typically, it's, an online classroom. You have a set meeting time. The kids join into the classroom. They work with the teacher for a, 45, 60-minute time period. And then their homework and their lessons in that is managed through some sort of an LMS, like an online learning management system, where the teacher can post assignments, where they turn in assignments, where they can have discussions. And that's how like the interaction off during the out of class time works, is through that.
Now, is there some flexibility? Like I'm thinking, like, can teachers, like you said, sometimes they can have maths classes like a load in one day. Is there flexibility for the teachers to say, right, I want to teach a load of classes one day and then have a day free, or do they have to do a regular, like a normal teacher would have to go into the school every day?
So it's pretty much like a normal teacher would have to go in. I mean, you have a schedule, depending on how the school has set up their schedule. But yeah, you definitely know on what days, what times you're going to have like your classes. But then, they may build in like an extra like tutorials time or an office hour where the kids can kind of pop in, for extra assistance. But all that scheduling is, directed by the administration and how, like, if it is a charter school, like how your charter is set up. So it's flexible in the fact that, you can, in between classes, you can, run downstairs and refill your coffee cup from the kitchen, but it's inflexible in the terms that you still have to meet, the number of days and hours and things like that, like a traditional school would.
Yeah, I think if you do that job, I mean, either your job in administration or as a teacher, I think you really need to set up your workspace great. You need a proper office, you need your microphone, you need to get everything, a place you can just close the door and function. I think, I think doing that kind of job from your kitchen table would be really tough.
Yes. Yeah. No, it definitely still includes all those different, all the things that you use as a classroom teacher, you still use as an online teacher in terms of, you still have, it's a little different, the classroom management online classroom management is different than face-to-face classroom management. I
Sure.
honestly think, in that regard, a lot of times face-to-face classroom management's a little easier because you can physically stand next to, the students, look over their shoulder, point, and this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is because online, my feeling with online education is you can learn just as much online. It just might take a little bit longer, just because when, students run into tech trouble or, then, the world kind of stops.
Yeah.
And then it's harder to manage individual problems and tech troubles and things like that with the whole group environment online. So,
Sure.
but I think, like I said, in terms of online education, I do strongly feel you can learn just as much. It just might take a little bit longer.
Definitely. And I presume, like, from your point of view as an IT manager, like, you have it's all web-based tools, I presume, all tools that you can run just from a browser.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Now I'm really curious about the entrepreneurship side. I mean, I've actually started a Facebook group, Educator Entrepreneurs, and I'm hugely into this subject. Like, so how did you come to start I mean, you've got a website, STEMQuest, STEMQWEST. How did you manage to sort of start that, and what was the kind of how did this idea come about?
Yeah. So with STEMQuest, and the QW is kind of a little play on words, because my first company had the word West in it, and like where I went to school, like the athletic conference that they participated was the Mountain West Athletic Conference. Okay. So that's kind of where the whole quest journey part of it. So I kind of jumbled a couple words together. But in terms of STEM quests, I started in 2016. I was an online teacher at the time. I'd been in online teaching for about a year. And at the time, my son was going to school online. And we were homeschooling my son. And he was extremely bright. He was the kid in like second grade that drove his teachers absolutely bonkers. Like, he was the very active ADD smart kid, and he didn't struggle in school. He was totally great. His academics were very good. The teachers kind of struggled with him and just, behavior management, because he'd be done quickly, and then he'd have, want to fill his brain with, something fun to do. And, they wanted him to sit and be quiet. So we had pulled him out of traditional school at that point, and we're homeschooling him. And the search for online school options for a 7-year-old at the time was difficult. The stuff that he was into and the stuff that he wanted to get in, the STEM, science, technology type classes, a lot of those were geared towards older students. Yeah. And they were missing kind of the cohort component. It was like, all right, you can log in and you can do this online course, by yourself at your kitchen table. And that wasn't the environment that he wanted. He wanted, interaction with peers and other people that were into the things that he was into. And so those kind of courses, they were a little difficult to find for younger students. And so I thought, I can kind of fix this. I was teaching programming, coding, video game design class at the time. And, my son was, super into like video games, and I saw how excited he'd get about video games, and he'd be talking about them all night at the kitchen table. And I was like, there's some overlap here in some ways that I was like, I'm a teacher. I know I can help fix this. I can design some courses that kids love that they still learn. So I started putting courses together. And my first course was actually the game design course. So I put together the coding programming class. And interestingly enough,
was it a bunch of video lessons? Like, what did it look like? Or was it a live
training?
Yeah.
So it was video lessons, because I was trying to clone myself, basically. I was like, how can I take myself and just, make a copy of myself? And so the way to do that was with video lessons. Yeah. So I would make video lessons. I'd put together like full color guided notes and tutorials, and then share those out with the students. Well, my first plan, it's kind of funny to be on the International Schools podcast with you here, because my first project was actually a teacher had found my website, and they were actually in China. They were working at an international school in China, and they said, hey, this game design programming class looks really cool. Can we do it in China? And I was like, yeah. So set them all up, got all their accounts, and then we ran into some internet trouble, not with the software, but with their internet. I think the Chinese internet was kind of blocking some access outside.
Firewall of China, they call it.
Yeah. And so he eventually got within a few weeks, he got his money back. It was kind of wild because he was sending me pictures. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest thing. I've got all these kids in China and they're like, so he's sending me pictures of them working on their computer games. And, they had an online site that they could log into and access all the tutorials and the lessons. And that's where it started. But then through my son, homeschooling him and looking for classes that he could do, we found OutSchool. I'm not sure if you're familiar with OutSchool. But OutSchool has been around for, gosh, I'm trying to think. They maybe started in 2014, 15, somewhere around there. And they are basically, I compare them to, they're the Amazon for homeschoolers. Right. So they are an online marketplace where teachers apply and they get accepted to be on their platform. And then teachers can curate and create their own courses and then post them on OutSchool. And so that's where STEMQuest now has had the biggest boost in terms of just volume and how we can service so many people from 37 different countries now, is that they're actually not coming directly to the website, but they're actually signing up through OutSchool. So I've got about, 10 or 11 different courses that are posted up on OutSchool. And so
OutSchool.com, is it?
OutSchool.com, correct.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And so from there, they can find the STEMQuest courses. Once they take one, they like the format, there's another one they can take and another one. So now we have marine biology themed classes, earth science, architecture classes, which, is probably the most popular. Well, I know that's the most popular class, but I can take my previous experience as an architect and kind of transfer that into, a course that, 4th, 5th, 6th graders can create something and do something. And they're not just absorbing information, they're actually going out and they're taking the information about architecture and history, and now they can go out and they can make their own models and designs of it.
It's interesting. That's one of the great things, we're both in this group, which is kind of location independent entrepreneurs. And one of the cool things about entrepreneurship is you can bring together a lot of different fields. You don't just have to, a lot of people just have one job, whereas we're bringing in architecture education. I actually studied civil engineering and I studied education as well. I can do a business when I can bring in whatever I want. If I want to bring in different things, I can start a business doing that. If you've got an entrepreneurial mindset, you can collaborate on different things, and maybe you still get to work a little bit in architecture and without being an architect. Yeah.
No, it's really great. It's the best teachers I think I've ever had are the ones that really enjoy what they're teaching. And so in this format, I get to pretty much, if I don't want to teach English, I don't have to teach English. That's not my jam. That's not what I'm into. But I can take all the things that I love. I can make that into a course that, then you're getting, the students on the other end are getting, quality education from someone that's not just has to teach the subject. I'm really teaching something that I'm super into. Yeah.
And do you do any live teaching where people can sign up to a real class, or is it all recording videos, recording supporting materials, and people get a full program?
I do. So I started, once I got hooked up with OutSchool back in 2017, with their format, I only had 1 or 2 classes at the time.
Yeah.
And so from there, I've kind of branched off and I've continued to add, like I said, it's up to maybe 10 or 12 different ones now. And I do live classes. It's just with my schedule with the school, because I was still working in the school system. So I'd either have to teach classes at 6 a.m., my time, and catch a lot of students in different time zones. So I'd jump online and I can do classes in the morning before I start my day job. I do a lot of winter camps and things like that, over winter break. So I've done spring break classes that work with my schedule. But with the online, they call it a flexible schedule class, where it's basically, it has start and end dates. So the kids, they know exactly when it starts and when it ends, but then the guided lessons and the assignments and the quizzes and the video tutorials are posted where they can work on them at any time of day. So that's where you can get students from any time zone can be. And it's really cool. Kids will be on, and one's in England and one's in Singapore and one's in the United States, but they can all be in the same online classroom together.
Yeah.
And not live, but they can post and have discussions back and forth and share their work with each other.
Right. So when you do this live teaching, you do it on this outschool.com. It's not part of your site. You do it for them, and I guess they take a percentage and you keep the rest, something like that.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, it's just it's like an Amazon. They host your course, and then they take a percentage for that, which is totally reasonable. And then but with that, they have a huge platform, obviously. And it's kind of if someone's on there looking for a history course or an English course, but then they're like, oh, let's supplement with this STEM class that looks entertaining. So it's a good way to reach a large audience that way.
And how are you your company STEMquest? How are you promoting that? Is that via OutSchool, or is it any other way? Like, because I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of teachers listening to this, because we have a lot of educated entrepreneurs, and they're thinking, great,
Yep.
I'm an expert in English literature. I've got a great idea for a course. Like, and how would I promote it? They can think about conceptually about how to create the course, but how are you, as a money making venture, how are you promoting this website?
Sure. So with the website itself is pretty organic. I don't get a ton of traffic actually to the main website. Most of the traffic is actually coming through like the teacher page that I have set up on OutSchool.
Right.
One of the things with
OutSchool is, I mean, that is the sales channel. Then OutSchool.
Correct. Yeah, with their percentage that they take from your courses, like I see my classes running ads on Facebook and on Instagram. So they have a marketing channel, but with them, it's kind of like, a snowball. Like once now they have a ability to like a teacher or favorite a course.
Yeah.
And so once someone likes STEMquest or they like the course, they're like, oh, this class looks fun, but I'm too busy right now. Maybe I want to take it 3-4 months from now. Well, they can like the teacher or like the course. And then when new sessions get posted, then it sends them like a little notification that says, hey, that course you liked, there's a new session that's going to start in, July.
That's really cool. So could I say, for example, I wanted to do a high school business and management course, and which may be related to a curriculum, and
Sure.
I could promote it on here. They take their fee, and I could teach that program.
Correct. Absolutely.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I never heard of this website, but it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious. You know a lot about the online teaching world. I mean, there's probably some people like we're in this community that's very location independent. And I've traveled a lot. We can work from anywhere. Like, let's say somebody wanted to become a teacher, but they wanted just to go straight into online teaching, because let's say they wanted to go and live in Thailand for 6 months. They didn't want to just stay in their hometown and teach there. Could you get your teacher credential like online teaching? Is that possible? Could I go to an online school as a teaching assistant or as a teacher and then get like a state credential? Is that possible for teachers to do that?
I'm sure that it is. I know that there's lots of different universities and things that actually do, different online teacher certification programs and such. Presumably for teaching license, typically you have to be like a resident or, have some sort of allegiance to the state where you're going to be teaching in. But for online, like I know that work with different online schools, and the teachers, they can be, in Europe someplace, and as long as they're okay with working in the time zone connected to the end, I mean, it might be 11 a.m. where your kids are, and it might be 6 p.m. where you are.
Does that also relate to your virtual school in the US, like the charter school? Do you get like Europeans teaching there, or is it only like people in your state teaching?
No, it's people in the state, because you have to be, the way that the charter is set up, you need to be licensed within the state where you're teaching. But if you need to go, visit grandma in New York, you take your computer with you and you set up shop there while you're out of town, and then you can teach from anywhere, really. I mean, there's the flexibility or not with your administrators. Like, they may have rules that, no, you can't do that, but there's really no reason why you can't, because as long as you're online.
Cool.
At the same time.
That's really interesting. Like, I'm curious about your business. I mean, obviously you don't need to tell us any numbers, but like, what stage is it at? I mean, is it at a stage that you could leave your job? Is it like a good side income, or is it really just paying for beer money on the weekend? Like, what?
So it started, So when I started it, I was sitting on my couch in my condo, and I was like, I'd really just like to have like $1,000 a month where I can, just throw a little more money into the savings account, or, take a little longer vacation in the summer or something. So that's actually where it kind of started. It's just like a strictly on the side thing. And then from there, within like a year, a little more, I started to think, wow, this is gaining some traction, and this is something that I could possibly do, as a full-time job. Now, right now I do, it does well. I mean, I've actually ended up adding a person or two. My wife's helps a lot with kind of some logistics background stuff. I've actually brought on another teacher recently that just helps kind of keep an eye on classroom, comments, and making sure that people get their, questions answered in a timely manner, as, volumes kind of increased a little bit. But it's something that I can do, on the weekend. There's a lot of people for educator entrepreneurs out there. If you think of it this way, like, there's a lot of time in the week. The best thing you can do is kill your cable. Like, turn off your cable
Great
TV.
Advice.
Like,
what are you doing? Watching Netflix right now? Or even cable. Get rid of Netflix.
Get rid of Netflix. Like, you save money and you can make so much more, because you can get up, you can teach a class at 6 o'clock in the morning, or you can get online and you can check emails and send messages to your students from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Then
Yeah.
you can do your job from 8 to 3 or 8 to 4. And then you've got 4 hours every evening where if you don't watch Netflix and chill, then you can, work. And then there's a lot of time on Saturday and Sunday. Like, you don't have
Yeah.
to put
Yeah.
in like a full 10-hour workday on, but if you do 5 hours, my kid sleeps in till, gosh, whatever time in the morning, get up at 6 o'clock, hop on the computer for 4 or
It's
five
true. I've
hours.
got young children now, and I love that time of the day, like from 6 till 7. It's my favorite
Yeah.
time of the day. It's quiet. I go downstairs, have a coffee. I can open my laptop. It's like the glorious hour of the day. No one's
And
around.
that's when my brain works the best,
Yeah.
from like 5:30 in the morning till, 11. That's when I can get more done in those 3, 4 hours there than I can after 2 o'clock. I need a little bit of a chill time, let
Yeah,
things
me
kind of
too. With
wind down a
time
little
now,
bit.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting. A lot of education entrepreneurs, I know a lot who could leave their job, but actually don't want to, because they actually some of them have, as long as it's not too heavy a workload, they've got their, they have a lot of good things like healthcare, and they have pension and all this other stuff.
Yep.
And they have enough time off. Like if your kid's in school, it's not like you can just be going off traveling all term anyway. You've got to kind of be in the same place. So I know people
Right.
who they could leave their job, but they don't. They just keep doing it.
I guess that's kind of the boat where I'm at. Like, I
Yeah.
could if I wanted to, but I love the people that I work with. I have a fantastic administrative team that I work with, some amazing teachers. I think that the school that I work with, is doing some really incredible things that, I don't have any reason to leave. Like, they treat me very well, and I really like the people. So I'm happy to keep doing both for the time being. That might change depending
Sure.
on how things go. But things have definitely, within the last few months, things have definitely had quite an uptick, because, when you close every school on the planet and the kids are at home driving their parents nuts, and they're like, the schools got kind of caught off guard with this, because they didn't have like a robust distance education plan in place. There's
Oh,
certain places that did. Like, I've talked with other educators that live in places where it's like super cold and snowy, like super frigid, and when it's 30 below and it's a blizzard outside, you can't go to school. So they do have like a backup plan where
yeah.
but most schools really got caught off guard, and they didn't have a backup plan, and so kids were at home driving mom and dad nuts, and they're like, all right, let's hop online and see if we can find you something to do.
Schools with a backup plan, like they weren't, until the last couple of years, they weren't really good, robust tools to do this. I mean, if you look at like Google Meet and Zoom and things, they've really come of age. I mean, obviously you mentioned you've got things like Blackboard. You have these kind of huge enterprise systems, but I mean, Blackboard costs like $100,000 a year for a school, and it's clunky as hell,
Right. Yeah.
So it wasn't like, I mean, the technology wasn't really, I mean, now the technology is 100% there. You can do it, like kids have got a Chromebook. It's a pretty cheap device. Not all schools in the world, of course, but, a lot of kids have got access to a cheap laptop with a good browser that can run most things. You've got web-based tools. And I think now there's probably a lot of, talking about entrepreneurial ideas, there's a lot of entrepreneurial options doing services, products for schools to help move online, helping them maybe developing tools or helping with consulting, developing plans. There's a lot of interesting work people could be doing with schools right now in this interim period, because every school is going to want a plan for next year. They're going to want to have a way to do this. And there's opportunities right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think a few years, when like I said, my first client was, and then I ended up having to refund him anyways, but was over in China. That was kind of my original goal, was like, I was like, oh, I'm going to find schools that could use my platform. They can log into my website. If they don't have, when I was teaching in the brick and mortar charter school, I was teaching science, but they said, all right, every teacher has to teach an elective, and we want you to teach some sort of a engineering, robotics, STEM type elective. And I was like, okay, awesome. But I was into that. Like, that's something that I was super. Now, in a lot of schools, like the STEM teacher or the computer teacher is the history teacher or the English teacher or the math teacher. And they're like, hey, we need to teach this computer class. You're it this year. Yeah. And they may not have the background, the skills, they might not know how to code and program. And the kids are like, we want you to teach this coding and programming class. Go figure it out. But if you can leverage other people, like a STEM Quest or someone else's business, where you can be either a curriculum provider or provide some sort of assistance or training to help these teachers out, where they can kind of have a program that's made by someone that's an expert, where they don't have to fumble through it. It just makes for a better learning environment for the students and a better teaching experience for the teachers. And so there's a lot of opportunity to, I think, offer support to schools and teachers that way. And I think maybe a few years ago, schools might have been a little less open to that. Like, hey, let's bring in this outside company that's going to, provide us with some sort of a, STEM curriculum. And they maybe in the past would have been like, no, let's just do it in-house. But I think now people are wising up, and schools are kind of coming online and to the idea that, maybe our in-house personnel can be used better if we do go with some sort of a curriculum provider, online platform.
Hybrid model. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, let's say I work with international schools, they're private. Maybe they don't have, it's a small school, they don't have some kind of, let's pick a subject like business. I mentioned business and management. They don't have that class, but so the kid could attend the regular classes in the school and then take, with this extra provider, they could take this one class, and maybe they take one class and the school kind of coordinates it. So there's options for kind of providers to work with schools, and maybe they just offer this one class. And maybe even the students sit in the classroom and it's on the screen in front of them. But there's a lot of hybrid kind of opportunities like that right now, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that now, in light of the recent situation with schools closing, I think even more of them are going to be more open to stuff like that. So exactly what you just said.
Ryan, I'd love to talk for another hour, but I've unfortunately got to rush off now. Where can people find you online if they want to catch up with you?
So easiest way is probably just to go to www.stemquest.com. So it's STEMQWEST.com. There's a contact us button. That's probably the easiest way to reach out.
Great. Ryan, really been great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for chatting with you as well.